Right, now I'm going to make some diabetic friendly oatmeal raisin cookies. So I put a cup of all-purpose flour, or 120 grams, and actually I found that 120 grams is a bit less than a cup, so it does help to use the grams. And I put 3 grams of baking soda. I didn't add salt because the butter is salted, and I used half a teaspoon of freshly grated Ceylon cinnamon, because I have found that if it's freshly grated, it really has a much better flavour. I also have the vanilla bean, powdered vanilla bean, because extracts either have a lot of sugar in them or alcohol, and so there are people who can't take either one. So I got just the beans are powdered, and that's all it is. It's just pure powder, but you use the same measurement. Raisins, egg, butter, and instead of half a cup of brown sugar and a third a cup of granulated sugar, neither of which diabetics can have, I'm using both of those measurements of coconut sugar, which doesn't affect the blood sugars in the same way, so they can have that. And it's actually very sweet and really quite lovely, so they can actually have cookies and cakes that they love, that they can really enjoy. And I'll add 1.5 cups of rolled oats and a cup of raisins. I think I said the raisins. I'm going to blend them all up as I usually do in the big noisy stand mixer, and refrigerate them overnight, and then tomorrow I'll come in and bake them. Ideally, what I want to do when all of this next couple of weeks of mad baking and cooking is done, I want to make a big batch of this dough, put it in the freezer for a month, because the longer it chills, especially if it's frozen, the better the flavours come out. And I sampled some that had been chilling in the freezer for a month, and they were gorgeous. So yeah, it does make a difference in the flavour, but we should chill them at least overnight. So that's what I'm going to do tonight, and then I'll be back tomorrow with the baking. See you then. Now, I had put this in the fridge yesterday so that it could chill overnight, and as you can see, the dough is much darker. That's because of the coconut sugar. It makes everything a darker brown. So it's been chilling, and the usual process, I just pick up a good lump of it, put it on the baking pan about maybe 5 or 6 centimeters apart, just enough to give it a bit of spread room. And then I put it in the freezer for 10 minutes. Sometimes because this is so chilled, it makes up too much. But anyway, so I'm going to put it in the freezer for 10 minutes and then bake it. The temperature is 375 Fahrenheit or 190 for us. If you want it to be precise, it's 190.556. But 190 is good enough. So when it comes out of the oven is when I'll then show you what they look like. I think I ended up putting too many raisins in the dough this time somehow. I usually end up with some that don't have many raisins in them at all, but I don't think I'm going to have that problem this time. Look how many raisins are in this one. Look at that. I think I've got too many raisins in the dough this time. Oh well. Right, so I got the first batch out of the oven and the second batch is in the oven. And they look all right, actually. I mean, the one that I showed you that had so many raisins in it, but it doesn't look that bad now. They're nice and thick. They're still warm, so they're just a bit squishy. I don't want to push on them too much, but they've come out quite nice. And I wish that I had had time to put them in the freezer. The interesting thing about the freezer is that I think we all know that if you put meat in the freezer, it changes the moisture in the meat and it can tend to cook and be drier and tougher. However, the dough that I put, I think I told you in the video that the dough that I put in the freezer for a month, the raisins were so juicy. It was the opposite. But I didn't have the time to do that. This was a request just a couple of days ago, so all I could do was run them in the fridge overnight. And hopefully, well, let's just try. No, I won't. But hopefully they'll be all right. Well, yeah, they seem okay. I mean, they don't seem like, you know, a rock, shall we say. But it's definitely better if you freeze this dough. Definitely better. If you make a batch ahead of time, put it in the freezer for a month, best ever. I did want to taste though how that vanilla and grated cinnamon tasted, so I'm going to go ahead and have one. The cinnamon flavour is really good, but when I'm thinking about how it tasted coming out of the freezer was much better. But this fresh grated cinnamon definitely has a much nicer flavour. I don't really get a taste of the vanilla though. I don't know. What I'm going to do though is make a batch. I have a huge cooking week coming up next week, so I won't have a lot of room in the freezer. But when I get space in the freezer, I'm going to make a batch in advance, put it in the freezer for a month, and then we can see what the flavours are like then. Which you never really taste the vanilla anyway, is the thing. I suppose it's just there to support other flavours. And the coconut sugar isn't obvious either. The main thing I taste is the cinnamon and, of course, the oats and the raisins. Maybe too many raisins. I know I've put too many for some reason. It just came out too many. But maybe that's part of it. But the grated cinnamon was definitely better. But yeah, so they're coming out well. These are diabetic friendly. No sugar in the vanilla. Coconut sugar doesn't spike the blood sugars like granulated and brown and all of that. This is a different sugar. And so this is actually diabetes friendly. Every diabetic is of course different. So, but I have had 2 different diabetics eat them with no problem whatsoever. And I had been told by a 3rd diabetic that coconut sugar works quite well. So evidently at least many diabetics can eat it this way. And I think adapting the recipes, the regular recipes, is much better than any inverted quotes diabetic cookie recipe I've found online. And you really have to be careful on YouTube videos, because remember in the COVID years when we had people going on YouTube putting up videos and claiming to be a doctor and giving the most outrageous advice for how to deal with COVID, which was so medically unsound that they couldn't possibly have been doctors. Anyone can put on a white jacket and get a stethoscope. Come on. And it's the same thing with the diabetic recipes. At the top of the list is a nutritionist claiming to be this qualified nutritionist, and she's making diabetic friendly cookies with chocolate chips, regular chocolate chips. She's not a nutritionist, so you really have to know your subject, which there's a lot of diabetes in my family, so I know it. The only person in my family who died of diabetes was because she refused to obey certain rules, one of which was stay away from chocolate. So I do know these things, but if you don't, it can be quite a deadly minefield out there. They can post anything on YouTube videos, so do be careful. But if you know the ground rules, then you are able to adapt these recipes, and they're so much better than the so-called diabetic recipes online. So that gives you an idea of what to do. Thank you.